Welcome to the Wiser Wealth Management Roundtable, where we believe the best financial advice should always be conflict-free. I'm your host, Casey Smith. Guiding you to financial freedom are my co-hosts, Brad Lyons and Matthews Barnett. Hey, guys.
Hi, Casey.
How's it going?
We have a very special guest today. Rick Bemis is with us with Rick Bemis Counseling. Rick, hello.
Hey, how are you?
We're doing great. This session is something that I've just seeing in my friend group, seeing within our client base, is coping with job loss in a pandemic. Job loss is hard enough, Rick. Do it in the middle of a pandemic. That's a whole different ballgame. So there's a scenario here that I'll go through. We have probably about 30% of our client base, maybe a little more now, are airline pilots. We specialize in working with them, partially because of my background in aviation. I understand where they're coming from. But we have a unique situation where we've had a job loss. And in some cases, we have airlines that have just disappeared. It's not really in the primary news because, the main news covers American, Delta, United, right? Southwest, Alaska, all the big major airlines and regional. But then there's a subset of regional carriers out there that like ExpressJet, like Southeast Airlines, that airline's now gone. We have Trans-States Airlines in the Northeast, they're gone. And you have an unusual situation where you've had an airline failure, but there's no place for them to go right now.
Right.
And my heart just breaks for them because I know it was like in 2014 when I hung up my captain hat and I decided Wiser needed my full attention. I know that there's a part of me that was missing after that because, I went down to the airport to travel for Wiser and I looked up and I saw my airplane taking off down the runway. I was like, they did it without me. I can't believe this. And I was pilot 2000 out of 2000. It wasn't like I was running the operation or anything. But that's what I want to chat about today. Let's be real about maybe our own struggles through this time, but also being empathetic to others. Maybe the takeaway here is how to show love and compassion to others, even if you're in a great position where you are right now. But yeah, Rick, you have a contract with Delta. Is that correct? Or you're part of the network that they refer out to?
That's correct. I'm a part of the United Healthcare Network and the Aetna Network, which also takes care of their employee assistance program. So I see a lot of Delta folks. My office is right next to the corporate headquarters, and I love it that way. I really enjoy the airlines. I was with Delta for 12 years.
Well, you can learn more about Rick at rickbemiscounseling.com, RickBemis counseling.com. But let's go ahead and get started, Rick. What are some things that you think should be on people's minds initially, at least right now?
Well, I would just say that this is a very tough time in the history of our country. There's no question about it. Between the pandemic and the election, people are feeling very anxious. I think people are struggling with the stress of all of the things that are occurring right now. And, one of the top things in my mind is the idea or the concept of avoiding toxic exposure. There's just too much negativity out there right now, and we are going to get through these times. We're going to be able to look back at it, and we're going to be able to talk to our kids about it as something that happened in the past, just like the Depression. And if you watch too much news, if you talk this stuff over too much, it can be very, very negative for your mental health.
Yeah, we talked about earlier surrounding yourself with positive people, and you gave an example of, during the Delta's bankruptcy.
Yes.
that pilots are hanging out with each other, and it was just
Yeah.
it just turned into not a good environment.
Yeah. So some of the guys that I speak to in my office would tell me that everybody would get together and talk about what was going on in the bankruptcy. And of course, that was a very, very hard time for Delta pilots, just as it is now. And they would complain to me that the conversation was almost completely negative. And I think we all have to watch out for that these days. You know, what can you do that you feel is positive and helpful to you on a day-to-day basis, whether you're flying or you're not flying? And what can you say to other people that can be more positive? And what can you think that is of a more positive nature? Because we are what we think. We are what we do. And so we have to think about the things that are going to help us to be more positive.
You talked about avoiding toxic exposure. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, you know, what I think about most is the 9/11 situation, some of the crashes that we dealt with in the 90s and the early 2000s. And we would always tell people to listen to the NTSB or the FAA because they were there on site and could give us the best briefings possible, and not to go home and look at ABC News, NBC, CBS, because it's just toxic. It can be so negative and so demeaning after a while, and it's only going to affect your mental health in a negative way. People get more anxious, they get more depressed.
It's just almost like they get hyper-focused on it.
That's exactly right.
When they really shouldn't be. They just got the best briefing they could possibly get.
That's it.
And they should just walk away.
Right.
Until the next briefing.
Same thing with the pandemic and the politics, you know. Get a little bit of it in the morning so you know what's going on, and then forget about it and go about your business, go about your day.
You know, when the pandemic was starting, we didn't quite fully understand. There's probably some anxiety over that, but just as a leader in this firm, I put us all on a video chat and basically said, "What did I say? We're not going to participate in a recession. We're not going to have job loss here. We're not going to participate in any of the madness. We are going to get through this, and we're going to get through this stronger. And in fact, we're going to be a better firm on the other side because of this. Yeah. Because if there is a quiet time, we're gonna take the time to renew our processes, which we did. Brad and I went through a lot of processes. We had Matthews during the pandemic at the beginning stages of it. And I think you have to have that mindset that, okay, I didn't create any of this. I have a stellar work record. I've done everything that I'm supposed to do. It's not my fault that I'm in this position.
Yes. Right.
And I'm going to then say, okay, I'm going to find another job similar, or maybe not. Some people may just walk away from their existing career, airline pilot or not. But you have to. It's almost like you can't be defeated. You have to walk into it and say, "Hey, I'm going to conquer this. I'm better than the situation." I tell my daughter sometimes, don't let other people define who you are.
That's great.
And I feel like that's what this pandemic and the job situation potentially has to do to people. It's trying to redefine what they are and or who they are. As men, especially, I haven't seen studies this on women, but for men, we seem to identify with what we do for a living.
Absolutely.
And it's very important.
Well, I think Rick mentioned that earlier, and I thought it was an interesting point, that we are what we think and we are what we do. And when you're coping with a loss of a career, you're also coping with a loss of that part of your identity.
Yes.
Okay. Being a captain of an airline pilot, can you think of anything higher than that? You are in charge of everything that happens, and you're 35,000 feet above the ground. That's an incredible responsibility. And then when that's gone, it's something that I would think that has to be dealt with in a realistic manner before you can begin to move on from there, and recognize that that's part of who you are, but there's another part that can be focused on if the first part is gone.
Yeah, what I've seen on Facebook across the board, people that don't really even know that well, just from the airline, I see a lot of pictures with them and kids. And that's one thing I think came positive out of the pandemic for us, is being able to be home more and not traveling around as much. So there's some positive things to do with that. There's a whole nother side to this, which I guess we can get to in a little bit. There's a financial side. So not only would the job loss of identity create an issue, but there's also, okay, how do I pay my bills? And I'll circle back around that in a minute. But there's a couple of ways that things can get awry here. One of those is one of the things you specialize in, Rick, is substance abuse.
Yes.
And so I asked you earlier, and it's kind of a silly question, but how do you avoid substance abuse during a pandemic and if you're out of a job?
It's a very good question. I've been struggling with that myself.
Just the thought.
Yeah, just the thought. So when we would go out on critical incidents, one of the things we would say is avoid increased use of nicotine, caffeine, alcohol. And notice I said avoid increased use. I didn't say stop, because that's going to create a trauma of its own. But people have to be very careful. And there's no question that I've had folks come in who have had an increase in their drinking just because they're home. They're not doing anything, or they're not doing as much as they have been in the past. And so it's definitely something to think about, definitely something to work with. Nobody wants to ruin their relationships or their health, and there are definitely ways to combat it.
I guess the other side of that, substance abuse, is usually masking anxiety and depression. Do you have any tips for our listeners on avoiding anxiety and depression?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you're stuck at home and you feel like there's not very much going on, boredom can certainly hurt you, and it can lead to increased anxiety or depression. And you have to think about the things that you really enjoy doing. For some of us older guys, think about what you used to love to do as a kid, and try to find things that are meaningful to you and get you out and get you working at something. Otherwise, you're like everybody else. You're bound to ruminate on the things that are problems more than the solutions.
Yeah, I could see, let's say you enjoy reading. If you could just get lost in a book for a few hours, I could see how that just separates you from the issues. The movie theater, if we could have, I guess, I don't know if movie theaters are open.
You can't go there.
I don't think you can go there, but certainly watching a movie at home, maybe that's the part that gets you back. Or maybe it's fly fishing. Maybe it's hopping in the car and driving to your favorite fishing hole or a new fishing hole.
Whatever it is for you, but just don't stick around the house and do nothing. It's very, very toxic.
Yeah. Or it could be stick around the house doing all those things you meant to do.
Right.
But you were too busy or too gone to accomplish it. I've seen a lot of, I don't know what paint sales are. We should walk down to Sherwin-Williams after this and ask them how their sales have been.
I'll bet they're great.
I bet you it's been through the roof.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, for anybody who has, had an interruption in their career, they will certainly recognize that there is the loss of the income, there's the loss of the job, there's the loss of the that part of your career, but then there's the opportunity that is being presented at that same point in time.
Yes.
To do some of the things that you wanted to do. Because as we were talking earlier, before we went on live here, is that, it's just a season in our careers or our lives.
Yes.
It's not the rest of our lives unless
Absolutely.
we've officially retired. So to take advantage of that time and say, I'm going to go on that trip. I'm going to go, learn how to play the saxophone. I'm going to learn how to do something so that when this season is over, I will have accomplished something.
Yes.
That I can now take with me, as an additive feature to, who I am and what I do.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of hobbies or just things you've always wanted to do. You could also, for that future career you're looking for, maybe there's designations or anything extra that could kind of advance you during that off time.
Been a lot of real estate agents I've seen online. I think every flight attendant I know is all of a sudden has turned into a real estate agent, which makes sense.
Well, there are transferable skills in every career.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, as a pilot, you are a captain. Leadership is tremendous at that station. Leadership is transferable
supposed to be, yes,
into any career and any life choice. So, there are transferable skills that should be exploited.
Yes.
Into a new career, new job.
Well, I think you're right. And, I love my pilots. And I agree that if you think about meaning in a job, there's hardly anything you can think of. Maybe president, maybe not. There's hardly anything that is more important. And you're taking care of the lives of people who are in the back of that plane. What could be more meaningful than that? So if you can't do that job, or you're laid off from it, furloughed from it for a while, what do you do that gives you meaning? It's very, very important to think about that and then to do something about it. And I would just say parenthetically, it was very hard for me in 2005 when I started to think Delta Airlines might actually go bankrupt, because I was in the employee assistance program as a counselor. And I knew if you didn't fly a plane or fix a plane, you probably were not going to be there. And I do want to say I took my own advice. I was proactive. I started looking for a job long before the employee assistance program dissolved. And I went over to Emory, and I ran the behavioral health portion of their faculty staff assistance program. And after about 18 months, I really missed the airline, and that's how I got back to the area around the airport to start a private practice. But that whole journey was a very, very anxiety-provoking journey for me. I hated leaving Delta, and I still love the airline. So I can identify with that, with the pilots, with the flight attendants. Most of those people really love what they do.
That's a good point. It's almost like it's like a club, Some of them even so much so the senior ones they will bid to fly together, so they're working with the same people,
absolutely
going on the same or similar route. Obviously, for most of us in our time, that was almost impossible to do, but some do get to that point. So let's transition. I think that's a good point, Rick. You basically said you saw the ship sinking and said, okay, I'm going to take the anxiety route and I'm going to jump ship.
Yes.
For the airline people, it's harder to do that because there's a seniority number. And so you don't ever want to walk away from a seniority number.
Absolutely.
Until it's you've been officially set aside. But but it depends on where you are. Delta, United, American, you wouldn't walk away from that number. However, on the regional level, which we have a lot of pilots who listen to our podcast that are on the regional level as well, yes, it might make sense. It might make sense to say, you know what, I'm going to go back to this corporate job because I'm pretty sure that this job won't be here a year from now or 6 months from now, or we're going to know a lot more about this by the end of this month or January for sure.
Yes.
Depending on stimulus and everything else. But yeah, I would say don't in any job, don't be afraid to take that leap into what appears to be a healthier path for you somewhere else.
I have some regional guys who are thinking about that right now, and they are interviewing for jobs. And they're sort of standing on the fence between, do I do this and do I leave, or do I stick with what I'm doing? And it's very, very hard to know at this point in time. So they really do struggle.
Yeah, I met pilots at the very beginning of my aviation career that got jobs with Pan Am. And when they got the job with Pan Am, it was like they'd won the lottery. And they would never have to work for a job ever again because Pan Am will never, ever go out of business.
Delta used to say that.
And Pan Am doesn't even exist anymore.
That's right.
Like Matthews is looking at me like, I've never heard of Pan Am.
Delta gobbled them up.
Never flown on it. I've read about it.
Yeah, Howard Hughes.
You saw it in a movie.
You saw it in a movie once.
That's it, the Aviator.
There's a whole other airline called Eastern Airlines too.
Yep, they're gone.
So yeah, you never know, right?
Delta gobbled them up too.
I would say that looking for a job, you have to remain positive, and you have to walk into the job with the attitude of, I'm going to tell them who I am, and hopefully this will be a good fit for me. But you never walk in thinking, I have to have this job. Like, I have to get this job. Because that generally don't work out because you tend to tense up.
That's true.
But be well prepared for the job.
Yeah.
But don't walk in there with a mindset of, if I don't get this, I'm up the creek without a paddle, because that's never the case.
There's something very enabling, I think, about interviewing for a job as well, because when you come out of it and you feel like people were truly interested in you, then it's definitely an ego boost. And so the next time you interview, you feel a little bit better about it.
Yep, that's right.
People want me. People are interested in me. They're asking the right questions.
My first airline job was the only company that would give me the time of day when I had very little flight time. And I flew little Beech 1900s for Colgan Air out of Bar Harbor, Maine, down to Boston 4 times a day. That's pretty much all I did. In the summertime, we got to go to Martha's Vineyard and Hyannisport out of LaGuardia, and that was kind of interesting. But I wanted to be at Atlantic Southeast Airlines, which was wholly owned by Delta, and then I eventually wanted to go to Delta. That was my goal. And what was interesting is I've never interviewed for a job that I never got. So if I wanted to get a job, in my mind, I was like, I just have to go jump through the hoops. I'm going to get the job. I'm not worried about that. Well, my second interview in aviation, I got the first one. I thought, well, ASA is not really talking to me because I don't have enough flight time yet. But I got an interview with a company called Com Air, and I went and sat down to the interview, and it went horribly. Horribly. I walked out of there and like, that was terrible. The whole experience was terrible. I didn't get the job. Yeah. And I was devastated because I was like, but I wanted that job. And why wouldn't they give me that job? Because I wanted that job. Well, you know what? It all worked out. Com Air was out of existence within, 5 years later. And sometimes things just work out for a reason. I went and interviewed at another airline after that, and I all but walked out. It was the most unprofessional environment I had ever seen. And I was at Colgan, which was like the scum of the bottom of the barrel, right, as far as airline goes. They were regularly threatened to be shut down, right? Eventually they got gobbled up after the crash in Buffalo. They got gobbled up by Pinnacle, which was owned by Northwest, which eventually got into Endeavor, which is now Delta.
Wow.
So that was a long path for those guys over one mistake. But you never know. You never know what the path's going to lead. And I think when you're in it, as we said earlier, it's a season. You go through a season. But there's something to be said. If you have a job and you're looking for a job, I feel like that you get the job easier. When you don't have a job and you're looking for a job, it's harder. So it's going to be an uphill. It's going to be an uphill climb a little bit, but at least you're in an industry that understands that. You're in an industry that goes, well, he hasn't flown for 6 months, but, well, that's because no fault of his own.
I agree.
So stay positive. That's what I'm getting out of all this. And there's, and we talked about different ways to try to do that. There's another angle too, is what if your job's fine, but you're walking through the crew lounge knowing that those 4 people over there are probably headed on the way out. Or what if it's your neighbor and they don't have a job anymore? And I feel like what happens is people just get kind of quiet and they don't really talk to them. What is your advice on how do you handle it when somebody else has lost a job? How can you be encouraging and not make it an awkward conversation?
I would just encourage people. I would just encourage people to talk to each other, communicate, and ask people what they need. That's not always a financial transaction. I mean, sometimes what people need is just a conversation. I like to say to new clinical social workers that 60% of my job is just ventilation. People need somebody to listen to them. They need affirmation, and they feel better after that. That's just rule number 1 of clinical social work. So, communicate with people, ask them how they're doing, encourage them, because all of those things can be more helpful than you may even realize.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be an awkward conversation, Invite them over for a barbecue.
Right.
And it doesn't, and also too, I don't think I would make it the main point of conversation.
Right.
I think you address it and you say, hey, is there anything we can do for you? Sorry to hear about your situation. And then just move on. Allow them to escape, their purgatory.
Yes.
And just enjoy a meal.
Yes.
Laughing and talking about other things.
Absolutely.
Because in the end, that's kind of what you need.
Right, and I would also say don't forget about the counseling community. Delta has one of the best benefits in the state of Georgia. They just went from 3 free employee assistance program benefits to 7 at the beginning of 2020, before anybody knew about COVID. And I see it every day that people are using these benefits. And I can tell you for sure 90% of my clients don't have a mental nervous diagnosis at all. They're coming in to do problem solving around just the kinds of things we're talking about. You don't have to come and see me. I'm pretty well booked up, to be perfectly honest with you. But there are lots and lots of very fine clinical counselors in the Atlanta area. And I know some in Peachtree City. So I just want to encourage people not to forget that that's a part of their health benefit. It's part of a holistic kind of way of looking at your health, very important.
Well, Wiser Wealth Management is committed to our pilots' physical health during this time as well. And I've put it out there on social media. If you want to come in and sit down and we can go through your finances with you, we'll be happy to look at the debt situation, the payments that you've got to make, what income's available to you. We can walk you through a little bit what we've seen in unemployment benefits. This is not a bait and switch. Wiser Wealth Management really has nothing to sell. We're a fee-only firm. We manage assets for people, mostly in retirement or just pre-retirement. We work by the hour for a lot of families, helping them solve financial issues. But we're offering an hour of just to sit down and say, this is the path that we see to help you get through the next 12 months. We did that yesterday with 2 pilots, actually. Matthews and I did, looking at this is the income that's available. This is the debts, and this is the living expenses. And how do we just put a Band-Aid on this so we get a reset in 12 months? And honestly, it's not as bad as a lot of people probably think that it is. And we have the CARES Act. We have the ability to withdraw money from 401ks right now with no 10% penalty. So depending on your situation, that might be something that needs to get done. I hate pulling money out of retirement, but like I said, sometimes you have to just get through a season.
Yeah.
And then if we can get you more fiscally healthy on the other side, then that's more money that you can be saving into your new 401k plan or your existing 401k plan once you're back at work. But we're committed to helping the pilot community. Rick, thank you for your assistance today and what you've done for the airline community. Matthews and Brad, thanks for joining the conversation, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Wiser Wealth Management Incorporated is a registered investment advisor. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and/or tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed herein. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.